She had exactly $11.47 in her bank account, a sleeping child in the back seat, and nowhere to go tonight. But what happened next changed everything. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you will never look at a stranger the same way again. The night Claire Whitfield found the envelope on her doorstep, she almost didn't open it. She almost walked right past it. And what was inside that envelope, we'll get to that. But first, you need to understand who Claire was, and what she had already survived just to make it to that night. Claire was 34 years old, with tired eyes that had forgotten how to be young, and hands that had grown rough from doing everything alone. She lived in a small second-floor apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where the radiator rattled all winter and the upstairs neighbor's television bled through the ceiling every night like a lullaby she hadn't asked for. She had a daughter named Lily. 5 years old. Brown pigtails, a gap-toothed smile, and a laugh that could fill a room the way sunlight fills an empty jar. Lily was the reason Claire got up every morning. Lily was the reason she didn't quit. People in her building sometimes whispered about Claire. About why there was never a man around. About where Lily's father had gone. And the truth of that story is something Claire had never told anyone. Not her sister. Not her neighbor Dorothy. Not even her own mother before she passed. But by the end of tonight, you'll know. Because it matters more than you think. For now, all you need to know is this: Claire was alone. Completely, achingly alone. She worked double shifts at a laundromat on 5th Street, folding other people's warm clothes while her own heart stayed cold. She earned $13.25 an hour. After rent, after daycare, after the electric bill and the grocery runs where she counted items as she put them in the cart, there was almost nothing left. That particular Tuesday evening in late November, she had picked Lily up from Mrs. Gomez's daycare at 6:30, strapped her into the car seat of her 10-year-old Civic, and stopped at the discount store to buy canned soup and bread. She had $11.47 in her account. She spent $9.12. She drove home in silence. She almost didn't see the old woman. And if she had driven past without stopping, the entire rest of this story would not exist. But something made Claire slow down. Something quiet and stubborn inside her chest. And what that old woman said to her after she helped her, those words would follow Claire for the rest of her life. It had started raining on the drive home. A cold, miserable November rain that turned the streets into mirrors. Claire was 2 blocks from her apartment when her headlights caught a figure at the edge of the sidewalk. An elderly woman. Hunched. Moving slowly with a cane, a paper grocery bag held tightly against her chest, already soaking through. Claire pulled over without thinking. She rolled down the window. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" The woman turned. She had to be 80, maybe older. Her white hair was plastered flat against her forehead. Her coat was thin, far too thin for weather like this. Her eyes, though, her eyes were sharp and warm, like 2 candles in a storm. "My ride canceled," the woman said simply, without complaint. "I only live 3 blocks. I thought I could make it." "Get in," Claire said. "I'll take you." The woman hesitated, looking at the little face peering from the back window, Lily, nose pressed against the glass, watching with wide curious eyes. "She won't bite," Claire said softly. "Neither will I." The old woman's name was Eleanor. And as Claire drove her the 3 blocks home, Eleanor noticed something on the backseat floor beside Lily's booster seat, a small cardboard box sealed with tape. Claire saw her looking at it and quickly glanced away. That box was the one secret Claire had been carrying for 8 months. The one thing she hadn't been able to face. And you're going to find out what was inside it. But not yet. "What's your little one's name?" Eleanor asked, turning to smile at Lily. Lily announced before Claire could answer. "I'm 5. And I have a loose tooth. She demonstrated by wiggling it with her tongue. Eleanor laughed, a full, genuine laugh. 5 is a wonderful age, she said. I remember 5. Do you have grandchildren? Lily asked. A pause. Something shifted in Eleanor's face, just briefly, like a cloud crossing the sun. I did, she said quietly. Once. Lily, unbothered and kind in the way only small children can be, simply nodded and said, I bet they miss you. Claire glanced in the rearview mirror. Eleanor had turned back toward the window, but her hand had gone to her chest, pressing gently against her coat, as if she was holding something there. They reached Eleanor's house, a modest white home with a front porch light on and a wreath on the door. Claire pulled into the driveway. Let me walk you to the door, Claire said. You don't have to. I know. Claire was already out of the car. She helped Eleanor up the porch steps, holding her arm firmly as the wet wood slicked beneath them. At the door, Eleanor turned. You're a good woman, she said softly. Claire shook her head. I just didn't want you to fall. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. Then she said something that Claire would carry with her for years. She said, Child, the bravest thing a person can do is keep being good when the world keeps being hard. Claire blinked. Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak. Go home, Eleanor said gently. Your daughter is waiting. When Claire got back to her apartment, she found something that stopped her cold in the hallway. A folded piece of paper had been slipped under her door. She picked it up slowly, and what she read inside, she nearly collapsed right there in the doorway. But here's the thing, this letter wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from family. It was from someone she had never met. And we'll get back to it, I promise. She set Lily up with a bowl of soup and crackers at the kitchen table, kissed her forehead, and then stood at the counter staring at the paper in her hand. She read it twice. 3 times. Her hand was shaking. She set it down on the counter, walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet so Lily wouldn't hear, and she cried. Silently, the way mothers learn to cry, with their mouths closed and their shoulders shaking and their whole body folded over the sink like something collapsing inward. She had been doing that a lot lately. Folding inward. After a few minutes, she washed her face. Dried it. Went back out to where Lily was happily eating her soup and talking to her stuffed rabbit about the rain. Mama, Lily said without looking up, do rabbits like soup? Depends on the rabbit, Claire said, sitting down across from her. Lily considered this seriously. Winston likes tomato. Then Winston's lucky, Claire said. That's what we've got. Next morning, something happened at Claire's work that she could not explain. A woman walked into the laundromat, someone Claire had never seen before, and she knew Claire's name. She knew things about Claire that no stranger should know. And the connection between this woman, Eleanor, the envelope, the letter, and that sealed cardboard box in Claire's back seat, that's the thread that's about to pull this whole story together. Hold on. Claire dropped Lily at daycare by 7:15 and arrived at the laundromat before Mrs. Park, who owned the place, had even unlocked the back door. She liked getting there early. The quiet before the machine started running was the only silence she got all day. She had just started sorting the drop-off bags when the bell above the front door rang. A woman walked in. Mid-40s, polished but not flashy. Dark wool coat. Reading glasses pushed up on her head. She carried no laundry. She looked directly at Claire. Are you Claire Whitfield? She asked. Claire straightened slowly. Can I help you? My name is Diane Harmon, the woman said. I'm Eleanor Harmon's daughter. The air in the room felt different suddenly. Thicker. Is Eleanor okay? Claire asked immediately. Diane's expression softened. She's fine. She's at home. She. Diane paused, pressing her lips together as if choosing words carefully. She called me last night. After you dropped her off. She told me what you did. I gave her a ride, Claire said. It was raining. She's 81 years old, Diane said quietly. She fell last winter, walking home from that same grocery store. Broke her wrist. She didn't tell me she'd been walking there alone again. Her voice tightened. You stopped. You didn't have to. You helped her up those porch steps and you stayed until she was safely inside. She said you had a little girl in the car and you looked exhausted and you still stopped. Claire looked down at the bag she was holding. Anyone would have done that. They didn't, Diane said simply. But you did. What Diane said next made Claire take a step back. Because Diane knew something. Something she had no way of knowing unless someone had told her, or unless she had been watching. And the answer to how Diane knew connects to something that goes back much further than one rainy November night. Farther back than Claire ever imagined. We're almost there. I want to offer you something, Diane said. And I want you to hear me out before you say no. Claire set down the laundry bag. My mother has been living alone since my father passed 3 years ago, Diane continued. I live 40 minutes away. I have a job, 2 teenagers, and I worry about her every single day. I've been looking for someone to help her, not a nurse, nothing clinical, just someone kind. Someone to be there a few days a week. Drive her to appointments, have lunch with her, make sure she's not alone. She paused. She asked for you specifically. She doesn't know me, Claire said. She said she knows enough. Diane reached into her coat pocket and placed a folded card on the counter between them. The pay is $22 an hour. 3 days a week. Flexible schedule, so you can work around your daughter's daycare. Claire stared at the card. Didn't touch it. I'm not looking for charity, she said carefully. I know you're not, Diane replied, her voice level. I'm looking for someone I can trust with my mother's life. That's not charity. That's a job. And after what she told me about last night, you're the person I want doing it. The front door bell rang again. A regular customer with 2 garbage bags of laundry. Claire straightened, fell automatically back into the rhythm of her day. I'll think about it, she said. Diane nodded. That's all I ask. That evening, Claire did something she had not done in 8 months. She took the cardboard box from the back seat of her car and she brought it inside. She sat with it on the kitchen floor after Lily went to sleep. And she finally opened it. What was inside that box was not what you'd expect. It wasn't documents. It wasn't money. It was something far more painful. And far more important. And it is the key to understanding everything, Claire, Lily, and the choice Claire made the next morning. The box smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet, a cologne she used to know by heart. Inside was a folded army jacket. A photograph, edges worn soft from being handled too many times. A small notebook with a cracked spine. And a letter, sealed in an envelope, with her name written on the front in handwriting she hadn't seen in 4 years. Her hands were trembling before she even touched the letter. Her husband, Sergeant Daniel Whitfield, had been killed overseas 3 years and 7 months ago. He had died on a Tuesday. She remembered because Lily had just started walking that week, those first funny, lurching steps across the kitchen floor, and Claire had taken a video on her phone and sent it to him, and he had responded with 3 heart emojis and a voice message, laughing and saying he couldn't wait to get home. He never came home. Lily didn't remember him. She was barely 2 when it happened. Sometimes she asked about Daddy in the picture on the bookshelf, and Claire would tell her he was a hero who loved her more than the whole sky. And that was true. It was also the most painful sentence Claire ever had to say out loud. The box had arrived in the mail 8 months ago, forwarded from the address where they used to live together, before Claire had to give up the house, before she moved into the apartment, before everything shrank down to what she could carry alone. She had not been able to open it. She had just carried it. Now she opened the letter. It had been written the night before his last mission. In the careful, slightly cramped handwriting of a man who hadn't written by hand in years. Claire, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it back the way I planned. And I'm so sorry. Not for going, you always understood why I had to go, but for leaving you to carry all of this alone. I know you will, though. That's the thing about you. You carry things. Even when you shouldn't have to. Take care of our girl. Let her be loud. Let her be messy. Let her fill up every room she walks into. And please, Claire, let someone help you sometimes. You are allowed to be helped. I love you more than I ever knew how to say. Danny. Claire sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. Then she got up, washed her face, went to the couch, and picked up Diane Harmon's card from the counter where she'd left it. The first day Claire came to work at Eleanor's house, something happened that she didn't expect. Something Eleanor said to her within the first 20 minutes, something so specific, so personal, that Claire almost walked back out the door. Not from anger. From shock. Because Eleanor couldn't have known. There was no way. Unless, and this is the part that still gives people chills when they hear it. Stay with me. She called Diane that night. Said yes. The following Monday, Claire arrived at Eleanor's white house on Birchwood Lane at 10 in the morning, Lily dropped off at daycare, a thermos of coffee in her hand. Eleanor answered the door in a lavender cardigan and soft slippers, her white hair neatly pinned. You came, she said, as if she had not been certain. I said I would, Claire replied. Eleanor stepped aside. Come in, then. I'll put the kettle on. The house was warm and full of books. Photographs lined the walls and the mantel, decades of a life, a marriage, a family. Children at Christmas. A man with a full gray beard holding a baby. A young Eleanor in a sundress, laughing at something outside the frame. Claire helped Eleanor with the tea. They sat at the kitchen table, and Eleanor asked about Lily. Claire talked, more than she usually did with strangers, and Eleanor listened with the particular quality of attention that only older people seem to have perfected, the kind that makes you feel like what you're saying actually matters. Then Eleanor set down her cup and looked at Claire directly. Your husband was a soldier, she said quietly. Claire went still. How did you, she started. My Harold was too, Eleanor said. Korea. Came back different than he left, like they all do. We spent 40 years making peace with what that meant. She reached across the table and covered Claire's hand with her own, a small, papery hand, but steady. I can see it in you. That particular kind of tired. The one that isn't about sleep. Claire looked down at the table. You're not supposed to know that about me, she said softly. I don't need to be told, Eleanor said. I just needed to see you. The weeks that followed were quiet and steady, the way real healing tends to be, not dramatic, not sudden, but slow and accumulating, like light returning after a long winter. Claire came to Eleanor's 3 days a week. She drove her to doctor's appointments and the pharmacy and the garden center where Eleanor selected bulbs for spring. She made lunches, soup usually, sometimes sandwiches, and they ate together at the kitchen table and talked about everything and nothing. Lily started coming on Saturdays. She would sit beside Eleanor on the sofa and show her drawings and explain, at great length, the interior lives of her stuffed animals. Eleanor listened to every word with complete seriousness and offered thoughtful opinions. Lily decided, within the second week, that Eleanor was her best friend. She says I can call her Grandma Elle, Lily informed Claire one evening in the car on the way home. Claire glanced in the rearview mirror. What did you say? I said okay, Lily replied, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. Because she is one. Claire smiled so hard her eyes burned. Diane visited on weekends, and she and Claire would sometimes sit on the porch while Eleanor napped and talk, really talk, the way women do when they stop pretending everything is fine. Diane had her own losses, her own invisible weight. Her husband had left 6 years ago. Her oldest son wasn't speaking to her. She kept it contained inside her polished coat and her organized calendar, but it was there. I think my mother needed you as much as you needed this job, Diane said one afternoon. Maybe, Claire said. I think I needed her more. Remember the letter that was slipped under Claire's door, the one that made her collapse against the sink and cry? We've been waiting on that. And now it's time. Because the person who wrote that letter, and why they wrote it, is the final thread that ties every single piece of this story together. And when you find out who it was, I think you're going to need a minute. 2 months after Claire had started working for Eleanor, she finally told Diane about the letter. They were in Eleanor's kitchen. Eleanor was asleep in the next room. The kettle was on. The night before you came to the laundromat, Claire said quietly, someone slid a letter under my door. I don't know who. There was no name. It said, she paused, pulled out her phone, where she had taken a photo of it. She read aloud. To the woman in apartment 2B, I have been your neighbor for 2 years and I have never introduced myself, which I am ashamed of. I have heard you come home late. I have heard your little girl laughing through the wall. I have heard you crying in the early mornings when you think no one can hear. I want you to know, someone hears. And someone thinks you are doing something extraordinary. I don't know your situation. I don't need to. I just know that kind of tired. And I wanted you to know that you are seen. You are not invisible. You matter more than you know. Your neighbor in 2A. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Do you know who it was? She asked. I never found out, Claire said. I knocked on 2A twice. No one ever answered. A month later the apartment was vacant. Diane looked at her for a moment. Then she set down her cup. Claire, she said carefully, my mother lived in that building for 3 months last year. After Dad died. Before we convinced her to move to Birchwood Lane. She was in apartment 2A. The kitchen was very still. Claire stared at her. She used to talk about the woman next door, Diane continued, her voice tight. The single mother. She said she could hear her working late, hear the little girl. She said she prayed for her every night. The kettle began to whistle, but neither of them moved. From the next room came the soft sound of Eleanor stirring awake. Claire pressed her fingers to her mouth. It had been Eleanor. It had always been Eleanor. A letter from an old woman in the apartment next door, a woman Claire had never met, had been the one human thing that kept her going through the worst winter of her life. And then, one rainy November night, Claire had pulled over to help a stranger on a sidewalk, without knowing, without any way of knowing, that the stranger was her. And now, let's close every door we left open, the way this story deserves. Eleanor had written that letter. The woman Claire had been helping, had been helped by her, long before they ever met face to face. 2 women, living walls apart, carrying the same grief in different rooms, never knowing the other was there. Until a rainy night made it impossible to stay strangers. Eleanor had known about Daniel, not from a file, not from Diane, but because she recognized grief the way only those who have truly carried it can. A woman who had waited for her own soldier, who had rebuilt her life after loss, simply looked at Claire and saw herself. That is what made it feel like a miracle. It wasn't. It was just wisdom. And it was enough. The box from Daniel's belongings sat on the shelf in Claire's apartment now, not hidden in the back seat, not sealed shut. Open. The army jacket was folded carefully on top. Lily sometimes pressed her face into it and said it smelled like something warm. Claire never corrected her. She was right. Diane had not been watching Claire. She had not been investigating her. She had simply listened to her mother, who had spent 3 months next door to a woman she admired deeply, and then moved away, still praying for her, still thinking about her, never expecting to find her again. Life found her instead. Diane had come to the laundromat because Eleanor had called her at 7 in the morning, voice full of something Diane hadn't heard in years, certainty. "That's her," Eleanor had said. "The woman from 2B. She stopped for me in the rain. You go find her before she disappears again." Diane hadn't even had her first coffee yet. She went anyway. The letter that had made Claire cry in her bathroom, the one that told her she was seen, that she mattered, had saved her. Not in a dramatic way. In the way that real saving happens, quietly, in the dark, when someone is close to giving up and one honest sentence turns the light back on. Claire framed a copy of it eventually, hung it in the hallway where she'd see it every morning on the way out the door. Daniel's letter had told her to let someone help her. It had taken her 8 months, a rainstorm, an old woman with a cane, and a daughter named Lily who made friends with strangers in waiting rooms and parking lots, but Claire had finally listened. She was letting someone help her. She was learning, slowly, that needing people wasn't weakness. It was just being human. Lily grew up knowing her father's story, not as a tragedy, but as a love story. Claire made sure of that. She told her about the voice message, about the heart emojis, about the way he laughed when he watched the video of her first steps. She told her about the letter he'd left. She told her he had asked them to let people in. And Lily, who had never needed to be told twice about anything involving people, took that instruction and ran with it. She collected friends the way other children collected stickers. Grandma L was her favorite. Always. And the whispers in the building, the ones about why there was never a man, they eventually stopped. Not because people got answers, but because Claire stopped looking like someone who needed to be whispered about. She stood differently. Walked differently. Smiled at neighbors in the hallway now. Her door, which had always been kept shut, was sometimes found open on warm afternoons, Lily's laughter spilling out into the corridor like something that belonged to everyone. And the envelope on the porch. The one Claire almost walked past on that first night. She had been too overwhelmed to open it right away. She'd set it on the kitchen counter for 3 days. When she finally opened it, it contained a single card, a handmade one, uneven edges, little painted flowers in the corners. Inside, in a child's handwriting that she did not recognize. "Thank you for helping my grandma Eleanor. She said you have a little girl too. I hope she knows her mama is a hero." Signed, Marcus, age 7. Eleanor's great-grandson. A child she had never met had written her a card. Because one night, in the rain, she had not driven past someone who needed help. She put it on the refrigerator, next to Lily's drawings. Claire Whitfield never set out to change anything. She had $11.47, a sleeping child in the back seat, and a heart so wrung out from surviving that she barely trusted it anymore. But she stopped. In the rain. For a stranger. And that one small act, the kind of act we talk ourselves out of 100 times a day, pulled a thread that unraveled loneliness and wove something new. A family that wasn't born but built. A grandmother made from chance. A job born from kindness. A letter finally opened. A box finally unpacked. A woman finally, slowly, allowed herself to be helped. Eleanor still sits in her chair by the window on Saturday mornings, waiting for the sound of Lily's footsteps on the porch. Lily still wears pigtails. Still has a gap-toothed smile. Still tells her stuffed rabbit Winston about the rain. And Claire drives to Birchwood Lane 3 days a week, thermos in hand, and she pulls into that driveway and she feels something she thought she had lost the right to feel. Safe. Home is not always a place with your name on the lease. Sometimes home is a lavender cardigan and a warm kettle and an old woman who saw you before you saw yourself. Sometimes home finds you on a rainy Tuesday night when you only have $11.47 and a heart that still, stubbornly, quietly, impossibly, refuses to stop being kind. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary moments can be extraordinary, and that kindness is never wasted, even when it costs you something, please subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, someone is standing in the rain. And maybe, just maybe, you're the one meant to stop,